Hello everybody and welcome to this evening's meeting of City of York Council's Area Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Andrew Hollier. I'm the chair of the committee and I'm joined on screen this evening by the other 10 members of the committee who are denoted by CLLR in front of their names. We'll also be joined on screen sort of by various council officers as we go through the agenda today. And if I could just ask officers to give their names and job titles when they first speak this evening. We've got 2 items on the agenda. For each, we'll start with a brief introduction to the scheme and an update on any issues that have arisen since the agenda was published. After that, we'll hear from public speakers. And finally, we'll move into debate and come to a decision. Throughout the sort of each point, there'll be an opportunity for members to ask questions. And if, as always, if I could ask members to raise their sort of blue virtual hand if you'd like to speak, and if you have a more sort of immediate point you'd like to raise, if you could raise your physical hand to the screen that I can see to bring you in more quickly. Just a reminder as well then that for each item we'll take a short break after, and just to members as well, just if you could make sure you stay on screen throughout an item. With that then I think we can move on to the agenda proper, and the first item we've got is apologies and substitutions. I've not been notified of any, and I think we are all here from what I can see. So we can move on then to declarations of interest, if any members have any. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest in relation to agenda item 4B. I called this decision in following contact from a number of residents and cited local amenity and parking as issues for calling in. I subsequently realised that my own house is actually in the same Res Park zone as the applicant's property. And so even though I wasn't aware of that at the time of calling it in, I think it would be inappropriate for me to take part in a decision that potentially could impact on my own personal parking. So I will withdraw from that item and I won't take part in any part of that agenda.
Thank you, and I believe that'll be after the break, so we will just need to remember to elect a vice chair at that point, and I think Councillor Webb's been sort of pre-warned that he might be sort of asked to step in at that point, so I think we can deal with that after the break. Next item then is minutes of the last meeting, which was 25th of November. Members happy for me to sign those as a correct record? Give me a wave or a thumbs up. Fantastic. Next then we've got public participation. I've not been notified of any public speakers under the general remit of the committee, so we can move on then to item 4A, which is the electricity substation Windmill Lane. And Gareth, if you could kick us off, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Gareth Arnold. I'm the Development Manager, City of York Council. I have Sophie Prendergast, who's the Development Control Planning Case Officer, with us also today. I'm going to share my screen. I should say we don't have an update. All matters are as set out in the agenda today. I'm going to share my screen for the presentation.
And that's come up.
Good. So this application, it relates to the Northern Power Grid primary substation site, which forms part of a largely deciduous woodland running the length of Windmill Lane, which is to the east of the University of York campus, West Campus, and the Science Park. Most of the site is within a woodland group tree preservation order. The application is for the extension to the primary electricity substation, provide a new 11 kV connection for the University of York. Serves long-term energy requirements for the university as they continue to build out Campus East. It also provides an electricity supply which operates independently from Campus West and thus improves resilience should there be a power failure. The university advised that the existing demand is near capacity and the new connection and supply is urgently required. The proposed extension is for a replacement switchgear which will be housed in prefabricated steel container which measures 13.3 meters in length by 3.9 meters in width by 3 meters in height. The proposals also require the temporary diversion of a public right-of-way, which will be indicated on some of the later images that we'll show. So the members orientate themselves. This is Field Lane, Lakeside Way, which accesses into the new campus east, Windmill Lane. You could just see the edge of development, the houses in Badger Hill, University Science Park, University Road. So the proposal is for the new area of the substation here. We've got some photographs. So this is the access road, comes in from Windmill Lane just to access the substation and the gas governor station in the far distance. This area here is the site of the substation, with the new turning head, which members will have read about in the papers, going in here. This is the existing site from the north, so the development is beyond the structures that you see in front of you there. Windmill Lane, this is the access into the substation, vehicle access. This is Windmill Lane looking south, where the trees are in leaf. It's a detail from the site plan, so that shows the new switch room, new palisade fence around the site, also fencing at the northern end of the site as well, and some new gates. Southwest elevation and the northeast elevation, southeast elevation, northwest elevation, that's just showing you can just see the top of the new switch room there. But this is the new fencing. The right of way at the moment runs along the edge of the existing substation. For the duration of the works, it'll be moved further east. See landscaping plan showing new reinforced landscaping on the route of the diverted footpath. So if you back to the existing substation, to an area of trees here which would be removed by the proposals. And this is from Windmill Lane itself. You just pick out the existing brick wall of the substation there. And here, detail again. This is looking to the south. The switch room would be in this area here. This is again shown when the trees are in leaf. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. As usual, I ask if members wish to see any of the drawings or images again.
Thank you. So if members could raise their blue hand if you would like to see anything. I can't see any at this point, Gareth, so I think we're free to
stop sharing.
Thank you. Yep, so I'll just ask if members have got any initial questions for officers at this point. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points of clarity, if I can. The public right-of-way diversion, I just want to be clear that the intention is once the work's completed, it would then be reinstated on the current line of the public right-of-way. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the intention. It's a temporary diversion.
Thank you. And then in, I think it's sort of paragraphs 5.3031 on page 24, it sort of talks about the various different trees that are to be lost. I think I've read it correctly that there are no category A trees that will be felled. I think there's one that needs special protection, but I just wanted to be absolutely clear that I've understood that correctly.
Sophie, is that correct? Yeah, getting the nod from the case officer there.
And apologies, Chair, if I can just ask the third quick question as well. Just again, a point of clarity. Paragraph 5.22, page 23, just down towards the bottom of that paragraph, it talks about a substantial cost of the work that might be needed to the Yorkshire Water Main if that site location was to be used. In discussing other site locations, it actually puts an actual cost. I think it's about 4 million for an entirely new primary substation. Do we have a ballpark estimate of what we mean by substantial cost? Are we talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in the order of 2 or 3 million as an entirely new location would be? It would just be helpful in terms of guidance.
Sophie, do we have that detail?
I did ask O'Neill's for that information during the course of the application, but we weren't provided with it. They might have it now. You might be worth checking with them.
I'll put the question to the applicant if they're registered to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. Thank you, Gareth, for the introduction. Sorry, this might have been easier to ask when the screen was up, but I couldn't find my blue hand at that moment. I do apologise. But it's on condition 4, and it's the landscape proposals shown on drawing LP01. It could just be clarification, is fine. So it's replacing all of the trees that are going to be removed. Are they on that same site then? They're going to be replaced around those edges. I just wanted clarification on that.
That's my understanding. Sophie, is that the case?
Sorry, I understand there's 27 trees to be removed, and then there's 20 trees that are going to be new trees that are going to be planted along the new line of the temporary right of way. And then there's also going to be some shrubs that are transplanted, but because it's quite a tight woodland, that's considered a reasonable amount by the landscape architect and the ecologist.
Okay, and I suppose my last point on that same point is during the lifetime of the development, because so there's a sentence: any trees or plants which are removed or become seriously damaged or diseased during the lifetime of the development shall be replaced before the end of the most immediate plan. Could you just sort of explain exactly what that bit means, the lifetime of this development? Is that in perpetuity or just while you're building something, or how's that work?
No, that's in perpetuity.
Lovely.
Although obviously the new trees that are planted within the area of the tree preservation order would be covered by the tree preservation order as well. So the protection is there with or without that condition. Although there is an area of that woodland which is outside the tree preservation order.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colwick.
Thank you, Chair. As we've seen from the remote site visit that we had recently and from the photographs presented to us, the existing structures are something of an eyesore, particularly covered in graffiti. I wonder whether with what is proposed, there is any treatment of the structures that would prevent this from happening in the future, if that were possible? Or are we going to finish up with an even bigger eyesore?
The new switch room would be surrounded by a fence, and the fence would also, I think if members saw the new gates at either end, so that the photograph which showed the roadway going through it, that would no longer be accessible as it is at the moment, because the compound would be enclosed. The existing brick wall on the existing switch room on the eastern side, though I think would remain exposed as it is at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Orrell?
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to condition 4, will the replacement trees be mature trees in a like-for-like manner?
My understanding is that there'd be new trees, there wouldn't be mature trees. The landscaping plan, which is too detailed really to have on the presentation, lists exactly what was going to be proposed, and they look like young trees.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any further questions at this point, so I think we can probably move on then to our public speakers. The first of which is Susanna Mason. If you're with us, if you're able to just...
Hello.
Hi there. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you've probably been told, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. But if you could just sort of hang on the line after you finish your 3 minutes, just in case there are any questions. But if you'd like to make a start in your own time.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Susanna Mason. I have 3 degrees in ecology, 2 of which I achieved from the University of York. And I've been in York and around the university for about 30 years. And I've just recently become a resident of Windmill Lane. So I want to talk to you about this proposal. This proposal damages healthy, robust, mature trees in this woodland. And there are lots of reasons why this is an unacceptable proposition, but I'm going to give you a couple of those. Firstly, the wood has been around since the late 1800s. It predates the university by about 90 to 100 years. And it's what's called an ecological corridor. So it allows wildlife to travel from one end to the other without disturbance. And these corridors are very rare in urban areas, extremely rare, and they are essential for British wildlife. And one of the things you will have heard from this proposal is that the university is going to engage in ecological offsetting, which is that you can chop down trees and offset the damage by planting new saplings, either in the same place or elsewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, there are departments at the university full of people that can tell the university that this is not true. Ecological offsetting is a lie. It does not work. It is like taking the entire budget for the NHS and replacing it with a fistful of pennies and saying, I'm replacing money with money. The value of the two are not equivalent. And you could have 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 saplings, and they would not come close to the ecological value of a mature tree because they do not support high insect biodiversity. No bird would ever nest in them. They cannot provide shelter. They are vulnerable to pests and disease. It will take at least 20 to 50 years before those saplings have anywhere near the equivalent value of the trees which are going to be lost from this proposal. And as one of the councillors said, you know, if you were replacing mature trees with mature trees, that would be better. But saplings, no, that is not offsetting. That does not work. So the woodland is already experiencing disruption from building work in the north end. It's already having disruption from new buildings that are being built on the science park. And this year, residents have observed a reduction in woodpecker sightings in woodland, which may have been caused by this. And there are bats, bats, foxes, tawny owls, so many species, and you're getting more dust and more noise. What is that going to do, both for the species and the residents? So finally, I'm just going to finish with, the university spent £200 million building East Campus. They would have known that expansion would require additional energy. So why are they refusing to spend almost £5 million on a new power station which would support their power? Why instead are they submitting this proposal with the full confidence that the council will ignore tree protection orders, ignore residents' wishes, ignore threats to biodiversity, and give the university whatever it wants? why are we in this situation?
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask then if the committee have any questions they'd like to put at this time. Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, we often hear the term mature trees. Now, I don't know an awful lot about building and electric, but I do know quite a bit about trees from a past life. What, in your definition, in terms of size, both height and girth, you would consider a mature tree? In terms of native hardwoods, or if you like, imported conifers. What is your definition of a mature tree, please?
Well, my definition isn't a botanical one, it's an ecological one. To me, a mature tree is one that has spent several years at least housing, having birds nest in them, and has a high density of insect biodiversity, which can be tested using a variety of sampling methods, sort of shakedown methods, under the bark checking. There's sort of a variety of things, but so to me that's a mature tree. It's the biodiversity that is held within that plant, which as I say, you've never seen a wood pigeon nest inside a bendy sapling. Very rarely. So to me that's a mature tree. So these saplings would not support that diversity, at least not for quite a few years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and hello there. I just wondered if I could sort of draw on your expertise in a way. I think I understand what you're talking about in terms of the corridor and in terms of the not replacing like for like and what have you. I'm just wondering if there is anything else that could be done as mitigation. I appreciate what you're saying is that the mitigation that's being proposed you consider to be insufficient. Is there something else that should be being done, or is it a case of just saying that this is too precious a corridor that you can't risk it, and there's your choice is either to go ahead or not go ahead?
Well, my first point is that the university has a viable alternative, and their excuse is we don't want to spend money that isn't going to earn us money, because they were happy to sink 200 million into a new campus purely for the point of making them more money. But I think it's tricky. I think there's a lot of aspects to this proposal. So, for example, they want to move the public footpath. Well, moving it is presumably you're going to have to mow down the undergrowth in order to move the footpath, and possibly knock down more trees as a result of moving that footpath. So I think so it's not just the fact the trees are being knocked down. However, if you had more mature trees planted, if the university increased, essentially built another woodland elsewhere, that would be beneficial. But it is my concern that this is a very rare piece of land, an ecological corridor, and it's slowly being chipped away, and that is what I don't want to happen. But so if they planted mature trees, if they planted trees elsewhere, there may be things to do. But as I say, there are alternatives. There are other things they could do, but their entire excuse seems to be this will cost us money, and to which my response is, that's your problem, not ours.
See, Councillor Crawshaw's just got a follow up there.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I'm just trying to think about the ways around this and where we are. But so you mentioned there that a possible suitable mitigation might be if mature trees could be planted as replacements, and I appreciate that a 30 or a 50-year-old tree that's not possible, because that's an enormous undertaking. But is there something that's available that's sort of more mature than a sapling that might be an appropriate sort of age of tree to plant in mitigation that might create at least lessen the harm, if not reduce the harm entirely?
It's possible. There's certainly people who sell tree, you can go on websites and find trees that are £500 and they've been grown up to, sort of 2 meters, 3 meters, and they have a fairly good crown. Whether that's suitable for a woodland environment, though, I wouldn't know. That isn't something I have the expertise on, because essentially you need something that's going to fit in both being native and being, it's not going to be outcompeted straight away into the woodland. So I think, there's definitely a balance between stick thin sapling and gigantic tree, which you can't move. But it has to be done quite delicate. All of this stuff is very delicate, and ecosystems are very delicate, which is the other reason, we're sort of quite reluctant to sort of say, oh, let's pour down some more concrete into woodland, because as soon as you build more, that means less carbon sequestration. It means less, it means more runoff, more chance of flooding. It means your moles can't bury in the ground, your hedgehogs can't bury, your foxes can't dig, and so I just sort of think there's not a lot good about this proposal. I appreciate the university needs more power, but they have options. They just won't want to pay the money for it. But and also, as someone said earlier, we don't know what the cost of this one is going to be. Is the cost so different? But yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. I could just see one more question, which is from Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Mason, I share your view about the loss of mature trees. It always grieves me when one of our trees in Strensall becomes dangerous and has to be chopped down for some reason, because even rotten trees can provide an enormous benefit for, burrowing insects and owls and the woodpeckers and the like. But there is another issue to this, which is carbon sequestration. Which type of tree do you think will contribute more to sequestering carbon? A fully mature tree, which is no longer growing, or a sapling or a semi-mature that is actually going to grow to full height?
Well, so certainly a dead tree is not going to do much in terms of carbon sequestration, but in terms of more, so it will still have, it won't necessarily release that back into the air. It will still store it, which is why burning is such a fraught topic of whether you should burn wood or not. So certainly planting new trees is always a good thing, generally speaking, unless you're planting the wrong thing in the wrong place. But in my understanding of I read the proposal, and I can't see that any of the trees that are going to be cut down dead. They're all still there. And also dead trees are enormously ecologically valuable because of insects. They're not something you should get rid of unless they're actively dangerous. And in terms of which, I'm afraid I would not directly know what type of species is most beneficial. But so what I will say is planting new saplings is a good thing. It's just not ecological offsetting. It's not equivalent. So 20 saplings for 27 mature or semi-mature trees is just nothing. That's nowhere near good enough. But as you say, in terms of carbon sequestration, planting more saplings is a good thing.
Okay. Councillor Fisher, did you want to?
Sorry, with respect, my question was not about dead trees. It was about trees that are mature and have reached full height and are no longer growing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No longer growing. No, they will still take in carbon, even if they don't use it to grow.
Okay. Thank you. I can't see any further questions at that point, so I'll just thank you, Ms. Mason, for your time this evening, and obviously the committee will take your comments into account as we can consider the proposal further. Thank you for your time. If we could move on then to Alex Champion, if you're with us.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, you'll have heard that you get 3 minutes to address the committee, and similarly, if you could stay on the line when you're finished, just in case there are any questions. But if you could make a start in your own time.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I was going to start off by basically sort of parroting what Dr. Mason said, but she said it obviously with like years of training behind her, and I feel like anything I say on corridors like that would probably be sort of relevant. But in general, coming from a sort of student who lives in the area, I think that the green spaces in the city are becoming harder to come by, and I think that obviously when you pave over these areas, you don't really tend to get them back. And I think that the coronavirus pandemic has sort of shown us quite starkly, especially with students and other people that I know around my age, that green spaces in general are very important to mental health and well-being, and being able to even just have that connection with the outside world. I know I'm from a sort of rural area, and I find it quite difficult to stay in cities for like months and months at a time without ever really seeing sort of the outside world. I feel like those are areas that really should be protected, and the university has talked a big game about its climate commitments and its environmental commitments, and it says that it's doing a lot of really fantastic stuff. So it just feels like this is something that seems really small, and they could just find a place that impacts much less, that doesn't affect the wildlife in that area, and doesn't cut down as many trees, and has sort of better climate mitigation factors. So yeah, I just feel like it seems like a bit of an oversight from the university, and it doesn't really seem like a huge amount of effort to just find somewhere else suitable that doesn't have the same impact. Yeah, Dr. Mason pretty much cut mine quite short because I don't really want to go over the whole green corridor thing, because yeah, if you actually look at it on Google Maps, I was looking at it a second ago, it's the main sort of area linking much of the sort of tree cover on the east side of York. It all pretty much stems in from that area, and that's how I'm assuming the animals would get in and out of the city. That means cross busy roads or go into people's gardens and houses and things like that. So it does seem like a sort of cutting off a major junction for them. Definitely, I think that's where I'll leave it.
Okay, thank you. If you could just bear with us a second, I'll just ask if the committee have got any questions. Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, we've heard talk of this green corridor. Can Mr. Champion tell me where the green corridor starts and where it ends? And what do the animals do when they arrive at the Hull Road end or at t'other end against the university? What's the benefit in terms of wildlife movement? And I think he also mentioned deer, which I would have thought any self-respecting deer will keep 100 miles away from that area, but so be it. That really is my question. Where do they come from and where do they go?
Well, I'm obviously not an ecologist and I don't have any real training on this, but just from looking at Google Maps, if you see between Campus West and Campus East, there's a sort of area of greenbelt leading out onto the fields. I think that's south of York, actually. Yeah, south of York. And that area of greenbelt stretches in towards that line of trees, which then moves all the way up along Windmill Lane to Hull Road into Tank Hall, and all of those sort of all of that wooded area, all of the green spaces there seem to be like the main sort of artery connecting them back out to the fields to the south of York, where I'm assuming most of the animals live. And I'm again, I'm not an ecologist. I'm assuming they sort of sleep out there and eat things, and I don't really know what they do. But that seems to be the main highway in and out, and I feel like that would be cutting it off and putting another sort of restriction on what little wildlife there is left inside the city.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any further questions, so Similarly, I'll just thank you for your time this evening, and yeah, the committee will take your comments into account as we make the decision later. If we could move on then to Mr. Graham Holbeck, who's the agent for the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you can. Sorry, yes, we can hear you. Yeah, I understand you're speaking for 3 minutes, and then you're also sort of joined by a sort of phalanx of experts. I guess if you could just at the end of it, of your 3 minutes, if you just sort of introduce the people you've got with us, and then I'll just ask the committee if anybody's got any questions.
Yes, absolutely happy with that, Chair. Thank you very much. I'd just like to start by clarifying 3 important points. Firstly, the substation at Windmill Lane is around 50 years old. This proposal is to replace the original switchgear, so it requires a location which is in close proximity to the existing transformers and control room. Secondly, the substation is a Northern Power Grid facility. The need to replace the old switchgear has been accelerated by the university as they require a direct supply to Campus East in order to meet the increase in power demand. However, the benefits of replacing the old switchgear in terms of reliability of service will be shared by the local area. Thirdly, the woodland that surrounds the compound was previously maintained by Smith & Nephew, but it has not been actively managed. The tree preservation order relates to the group value of the woodland, but there are many individual trees which are considered to be in a poor condition. To address the issue of alternative options, the substation is known as the Windmill Lane Primary, so it is one tier up in the supply chain from a distribution substation and a much more significant piece of infrastructure which serves the southeast area of the city. To give a measure, the cost of relocating a primary substation would be in excess of £5 million. This option would not be supported by the industry regulator Ofgem, as there is a more cost-effective solution available. In determining the precise location of the new switch room, the university has worked with Northern Power Grid to investigate the options near to the existing substation, the aim being to reduce its impact. However, the adjacent car park at Smith & Nephew contains a large water trunk main which runs all the way along the northern boundary and effectively rules out this option. There is less tree cover on the land to the northwest of the transformers, but this is because it already hosts a significant amount of underground gas and electricity services, which leaves the proposed site to the south. In order to facilitate the proposal, the overall number of trees to be removed at 27 is clearly significant. However, it's important to note that all but 3 of them are either young or low quality specimens, and in 2020 the university has already planted over 1,000 trees throughout their estate, and an additional 30 trees will be planted within the application site to compensate for these losses. The woodland will also benefit from much better management in the future under the provisions of the university's woodland management plan. In our view, the overriding factor is that the proposed upgrade is required to provide the necessary service infrastructure for the local area and to support the ongoing development of Campus East. This is a key aspiration of both the local plan and the local economic strategy, and we hope that members will therefore endorse the recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair. Just mentioned about introducing the speakers. I've got Janet here with me, who you're all familiar with, Janet O'Neill. She's obviously able to give the wider picture regarding the university estate. We've also got representatives from the university, Mike Richardson, the Director of Estates, and Michael Ross, who is the project manager for this particular project. Also on the line, sorry, it's a bit of a long list, we've got Chris Grantham and Phil Dixon from Northern Power Grid, who are able to answer any technical questions, and then Dan Robinson from Smeed & Foreman, who is a landscape architect and can obviously answer any specific arboriculturalist questions.
Thank you. And I can see a couple of questions already, so I'll start with Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, I've got a couple of questions. I just wanted to put the question that I asked earlier to the applicant. So paragraph 5.22 of our report mentions the possible use of the car park and the water main that you've mentioned, and it says that there would be a substantial cost to using that option. And I just wondered if you could give us what sort of order of substantial cost Are we talking millions, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands?
Yeah, so it's Janet O'Neill here. That water main starts at Elvington Water Treatment Plant and is a major trunk main that runs up into the city. It goes along the southern side of Low Lane on the campus east, up the western side, and then goes to the service reservoir, which is at Heslington Hill. So if you think where there's that water tower, below that to the east is a large service reservoir that serves this side of the city. It's a 700 mil, so you can imagine the size of the pipe and the arrangements that would have to be made to substitute it and then do a crossover between the two. So we haven't got a cost from Yorkshire Water, but it is the major trunk main from the water source at Elvington, where the water is extracted from the river, up to the service reservoir at Heslington Hill. But so a lot, easily into 7 figures.
Thank you. And if I may, Chair, is it okay to put my second question?
Yeah, no, keep going.
Yeah, thank you. The other question, I guess, maybe is for the technical people. I just wanted to understand, so this is a primary substation, and then you have the distribution substations that run off that. So presumably there must be a number of distribution substations from the primary substation. And so if you're wanting to draw more power, which I think is what this is ultimately about, then presumably that's about being able to feed a greater number of distribution substations. Is there no other primary substation that's appropriately located in the university area that has more capacity that could bring, so you could essentially, could you add further distribution substations at different points around the campus that would mean that you wouldn't need to draw more power through this primary substation? If I've articulated that, I can see it in my head. I'm not sure if I've articulated it quite as I mean it.
We've got Chris Grantham on the line from Northern Power Grid. He might be able to explain why adding additional distribution substations wouldn't perform that role, basically. Chris, are you able to come in on that, please?
Yeah, basically we are just feeding one new substation from the primary substation, which will be the substation to the energy centre, the new energy centre that the York University are building on the East Campus. So we won't be needing to build any further secondary substations. We're just supplying the new energy centre from an existing primary substation. In terms of the nearest suitable primary substations that already exist, roughly in terms of distance, York University Primary is 1.6 kilometres away from the new energy centre site, and the next closest would be Melrose Gate, which is approximately 3 kilometres away from the new energy centre site. So it's roughly double the distance we need to lay cables.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can see quite a few blue hands up, so just a plea if we could try and keep questions and answers as brief as possible. But if I could go then to Councillor Perrott.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a point of clarity on the number of trees, because I believe we've been told it was going to be 20 replacement trees, and then we're given an updated figure by Graham of 30. So it'd just be useful if we could get a bit more sort of an understanding of how substantial the trees will be and what the exact number will be, please.
Yes, of course, Councillor. It will be 30 trees that are provided in replacement. And that's clarified on the landscape plan that's submitted as part of the application. In terms of their substance, we do have, as I say, Dan Robinson on the line from Tweed and Foreman, who might be able to give you a bit more information on this. There are varying heights and girth. The difficulty that we have in some respects, and this has been touched on by one of the speakers, is obviously planting within the woodland. We need to plant trees that will flourish within that woodland, so shade tolerant trees will flourish in that area, and that means that they're not necessarily of the same height as perhaps the existing ones. Dan, I'm not sure if you're able to just expand on that a little bit, please.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so yeah, just to back that up, yeah, we're planting 30 trees. There'll be a mix of, well, there'll be mostly young trees because we can't sort of plant mature ones. It's too much of a shock to the root system when they're transplanted from a tree nursery. But there will be a mix of heights ranging from 1 metre up to about 3.5 metres. And as Graham said, the species will match closely what are already growing in that woodland situation. So they'll all be suitable to establishing their sort of shade conditions. If that answers that.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask for a bit of clarity on what you were saying about why other sites aren't suitable. You mentioned off-gen, I think, and giving that as a reason why another site that would be more expensive couldn't be used because off-gen would not allow it because another site at a lower cost is available. And I assume you mean by that you're referring to this site.
Yes, I mean the reason why. Sorry, can you hear me? Because I didn't dial back in.
Yep, now we can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. Yes, what I was referring to in terms of alternative options is I think it was commented on within the objectors' comments that there might have been a prospect of relocating the primary substation. So we were simply saying that that wasn't an option that Ofgem would consider simply due to the cost of it. In terms of other options for this particular piece of infrastructure, i.e. the new switchgear, what I was trying to explain is that it's not, it needs to be located next to the existing control room and the existing transformers. So it's never been a case of finding an alternative location for the switchgear. It has always needed to be next to this existing primary substation. We have looked at options within the proximity, but they've been ruled out for the reasons I've already stated.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Cheers, thank you. I was just wondering if you could explore a little bit about, we've said that this is to increase power availability, essentially, and how close are we to the limit? How serious is this? Is this the minute that another building's built, that's it? There's going to be major problems. And I suppose the other point of it is what's the lifespan of this proposal? I mean, obviously we're being told on a regular basis that there's a climate emergency, and actually the national grid potentially is something that we need to look at how we reform that. So are we going to get to a point where in 10 years time we suddenly need some new piece of kit in that space, or how's this might not be appropriate?
Yeah, just to come in on the capacity issue, and I'll pass this on to Mike Ross, who's the project manager for this particular project in a moment. My understanding, and hopefully Mike will endorse this, is that the peak demand, peak recorded demand at the university, i.e. Heslington East and Heslington West, was 8 megawatts. At the moment, they have a 10 megawatt connection from the substation. So, they're obviously creeping close to that threshold. With the development that is occurring at Campus East, i.e. the new residential college, the new Safe Autonomy building, of course, a third of the allocated campus is still to be developed. And then there is the additional area, the allocated area within the local plan. So, following the completion of the residential college, they're becoming very close to that 10 megawatt threshold. So there is an urgent need for this new connection. In terms of additional infrastructure that may be required in the future, I'm afraid I cannot answer that. I know that one thing that the university is looking at, in addition to this 10 megawatt connection, is obviously supplementing their own self-sustainability. So obviously there's a new energy centre recently been approved at Campus East. That is a combined heat and power plant which will generate some electricity. There is scope as well to extend that in the future with additional modules to further increase their self-sustainability. But that doesn't change the fact that they still need the backup supply from the grid, because the nature of CHP is that the power fluctuates over time. So they do need the backup supply from the grid, which this 10 megawatt connection will serve. Mike, this is to Michael Ross. Are you able to expand on that at all, please?
Hello there. Yes, thank you for that. Just to answer Councillor Webb's question. Yes, it would be in 2022 when we complete the residences, the second phase of the residences, and they come online, would be when we would reach the limit of our current capacity. And then just taking that as another step forward, the work that NPG are undertaking now would help future-proof any future works. It isn't just the university that benefit from the substation. The substation supports 4,000 customers, of which the university is only one. So the work that NPG are undertaking now, which the university are contributing towards, will replace the 50-year-old switchgear and help future-proof any further developments wherever that might emanate from.
Could I just ask supplementary on that? My question is more about future-proofing the actual primary station that you're talking about building. I mean, is that going to be fit for purpose in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, or is it that actually things like the Sustainable Energy Centre are going to supplant things like this plant?
No, as Graham has always, as previously said, we still need the backup from the grid to support any sort of self-generation that the university might produce, for that unforeseen circumstance when that generation is not available. We need to have that resilience that can only be provided by the grid connection.
My last point on this, thank you, Chair, for indulging me, is so how's the university generating this energy then? Why is the supply going to be so unreliable?
No, the generation is what we call combined heat and power units, and they can't run 365 days a year. They have to be taken offline for servicing, maintenance, etc. So during those periods, they can't be relied upon. So hence, that's when we would need to fall back upon the grid to sort of supplement, the energy demand.
Thank you.
Chair, you're on mute.
Councillor Cracken, try again.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. I'll try not to repeat anything anyone said, but I've got a few questions that relate to the alternatives and the sort of technical side of the provision. I just wondered if you could, first of all, I understand why you want to replace the 50-year-old switching gear and that we need to upgrade a lot of aspects of the grid in order to meet the climate emergency. So I appreciate that. But could you just, first of all, clarify if I'm understanding correctly that you don't actually need the building extension in terms of space to increase capacity. You need the building extension because you need to keep the old and the new running at the same time. You can't risk trying to replace the existing switching gear in situ. Is that right?
That's correct, Councillor. It's about the vulnerability that would create over a sustained period of time. if you need more technical reasons on that point, then we can obviously refer to Chris at MPG, who'll be able to explain it.
Yeah, well, we're probably going to struggle when we get too technical, but it's just really checking that that is the correct understanding, and there isn't really any option to protect the existing supply in terms of doing. There isn't an option in terms of the switch. You need to protect that existing supply to people, I suppose, but you don't actually need the extra space in the end when it's all finished. It just seems a shame, but I'm not sure what I'm not sure what we can do about that specifically. My next question was really along the lines that other people have raised about the comparative costs. So we know that the car park, we know that a new primary station would be around 5 million. You kind of came close to giving us a figure for the car park option, but I'm not sure, would that be less than 5 million?
We don't have a definitive figure to offer you on that. It wasn't not for the want of trying. We did try and establish that with Yorkshire Water, but to be honest, in our initial inquiries, they're sort of questioning why we would even ask that question. So it was very difficult to establish the figure. I mean, obviously it's about the cost, number one, but secondly about again the security of supply over a sustained period of time, and the disruption to what is a very significant piece of infrastructure in the locality.
Right, and I suppose my final question of this set is about Councillor Webb was asking about sort of broader energy plans and the future energy plans in the context of climate change. And I was just thinking about that almost conversely, if the university has a plan bearing in mind the switch to electric that's happening, might we not see, you're saying that a new primary station might not be regarded as financially viable at the moment, but might it not just come along in a few years' time that you actually feel you do need another primary station because of the demands on the grid from electric vehicles and other SOT, I don't know, other sources? Has the university got an energy plan that looks in the context of the climate emergency in terms of the demands on the grid?
I will ask Mike Ross perhaps to come in on the question of whether a new primary might be required in the future. I know that he's done an assessment to look at what this new connection will facilitate in terms of development, and was confident that it would facilitate the development of the rest of campuses as allocated, as currently approved by the Outline Planning Permission, but then the additional allocated area in the draft local plan as well. I think I'm right in saying that that's the case, Mike?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, and we have factored in considerations like car charging and the increased reliance on electrical power in favour of other methods of power generation, and for that matter, heat generation as well. So yes, we have looked at the figures for the expansion, and this has dictated the size of the request that we've put in for this new supply.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just stepping back slightly? I was going to ask you if you could tell us also, just in terms of comparing these different costs, do you have a cost for the current proposal, as the speaker mentioned?
The current proposal for
this application.
I'm not quite with you, understanding the current cost of the new supply.
Yeah, of the work that you're proposing to do in this application.
Well, the university are paying for the new cable to be laid to the energy centre, and then we pay a contribution towards Northern Power Grid's costs. So we're not footing the whole bill for these works. But our cost for the cable connection is just short of £2 million. And that's with just paying, as I say, a contribution towards NPG's works.
Right. So presumably the total cost is anything up towards 3, 4, 5 million, is it?
I don't know. I'm not privy to their full costs.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I had a quick look around the university on Google Maps today, and I saw vast areas of roof and not a single solar panel could I detect. Can you explain why the university has not gone down the lines of local energy generation through solar panels and other sustainable projects in the past? Because it does seem to be a vastly missed opportunity.
Yes,
sorry, Mike, are you taking that question?
Yeah, I can take that question. Yeah, it is something we have considered. We've considered green energy as part of our overall strategy, be that solar, wind, geothermal. We've considered all these strategies. The problem with the solar energy is the sheer area of solar panels we would need to provide to actually, give an equivalent power. We have a small amount on some of our buildings already, but it's only local to those buildings. When we're looking to get the capacity that we're talking 10 megawatts here, if you imagine your domestic house would have solar panels which would give you 4 kilowatts, you're increasing that by a factor of 2,000. So you can imagine the actual surface area of solar panels you would need to provide a similar supply. You would have hundreds of square meters of solar panels just to give a proportion of the supply. So as I say, it is something we have considered, but it's the sheer area that we would need to actually make a substantial contribution.
I take your point, but I refer to a famous supermarket, every little helps.
Yes, yes, and I do agree. I think in future, solar panels will become more prevalent on the buildings, but that will only supplement the demand. And as you say, every little will help. And I think that will come in the future.
Can I just add something to that discussion? Sorry, just from our involvement in the recent energy centre proposal, my understanding is that the university actually pays a premium to ensure that the power that they do source from the grid is from renewable sources. I think I'm right in saying that, Mike.
Yes, that's correct. The 100% of the energy that we import is green energy, and we pay the premium for that.
Thank you. Back then to Councillor Crawshaw, and then I do hope to wrap this up.
Thanks, Chair, and I hope I can say this succinctly, ask the question succinctly. I just wanted a point of clarity. I think from what you've been saying, what I've understood is that the switching gear that supplies 4,000 odd customers is life expired and needs replacing. And that because of the additional demands on this primary substation, primary distribution station, sorry, I'm mixing my words, you want to upgrade and extend it. If you were seeking just to replace the switching gear to deliver the same amount of capacity as is currently being delivered, could that be done within the existing structures? Or has the technology changed in the 50 years that means that actually the structures are obsolete and even if you wanted to just keep it as it was, you would still require additional buildings or expansion of the site?
Thank you, Councillor. I think I'm right in saying, I'll refer to Chris at MPG in a moment. I think I'm right in saying that there would be, even if you replace the switchgear in situ, you would need a minor extension because we're obviously facilitating new connections, so you need additional switchgear for that. The problem with replacing in situ is that you create a vulnerability of service for a sustained period of time. I think I'm right in saying it's over an 18-month period, and that's the difficulty in replacing in situ. Chris, are you able to come in on that point to correct me where I'm wrong? Sorry, have we lost Chris?
Yes. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, we've got you.
Right, yeah, sorry about that. So in terms of the footprint, we wouldn't need to extend the current building if we replace in situ, because modern switchgear is physically smaller than the switchgear that's already there from 50 years. It's 50 years old now, so it is a lot smaller. So we wouldn't need to increase the footprint of the building, but there are more significant risks to the existing customers. It's a generalised risk that we understand. When we replace switchgear in situ, it does place more risk on this scheme. I couldn't tell you exactly how we would calculate the risk. It's just, and I'll be honest, we do this, but where we've got the option not to replace in situ and to use a modular building and slightly new switchgear separately, then that is always our preferred option, because it does reduce the risk.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any further questions, so if I could just again thank you all for your time this evening, and if we could then move on to Councillor Norman, who's the local ward member. If you're with
Hello,
us.
can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll know you've got 3 minutes, and I'll give a warning at 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. The application before you is presented as a matter of essential need for the applicant, trumping all environmental considerations and local amenities. I think that's an oversimplification, and I implore you to consider that there is a possible direction going forwards which satisfies both essential need and protects our ecology, climate, and local amenity. All it needs is a little courage on the part of the applicant and for you to reject this application today. This is a hugely valued local amenity. I know residents are very proud and passionate about this woodland, and I'm saddened to see it threatened again so soon after we protected it from developers further up in Mill Lane. If the woodland were 10 yards across a quiet country road, it would be in the proposed green belt. 4.8 million, probably less, as we've heard today. It sounds like a lot of money, but let's be frank. The energy problems at the moment are simply going to get worse. The university is going to continue to expand and increase its power requirements, and to submit such a sticking plaster is ridiculously short-sighted and unsustainable. How long will it be before the next requirement for modernisation requires more work in a difficult to access location with a heavily used public footpath running right up against the building and ecologically important woodland all around? The application does not look to the future and places no value on ecology, local community or environmental challenges. It just attaches a price tag to them. The university's latest financial report stated the institution is in its strongest financial position ever. It isn't the first time that we've had financial considerations brought out as an excuse by the applicant to dodge its commitments on ecology and climate change. First, renewable energy generation plans for Campus East fell away. Then biogas was just too expensive to generate energy on campus. Now we're back to fossil fuel and destroying ecologically valuable woodland. While academics and students are busy fighting climate change, it seems those in Heslington Hall are beckoning it on. There is clearly an essential need, but this application is not the solution. It's an act of vandalism to save a few quid. We need to work together to find a better, more sustainable way forward. I'm happy to do that with the university, but I need you to reject this application today so we can start that work with a clear set of guidelines.
30 seconds
This woodland
left.
is precious and it must be protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you could just hang on, I'll just ask if there's any questions. Can't see any. Oh, Councillor Galvin.
Yes, you mentioned fossil fuels. As I understand it, as we've heard today, the entire served supply of electricity through this substation and the switchgear is going to be green energy. Have you not picked up on that?
So just for clarity here, Councillor Gavin, thank you. So the university said that all energy that is imported into the university is not generated from fossil fuel. The university's Sustainable Energy Centre on Campus East burns gas, natural gas.
Thank you. Councillor Perrott.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Norman, you mentioned it being a valued local amenity, and we did have a local resident speak, but more about its use as a wildlife corridor. I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more information about how local people actually use the space there.
Yeah, I can do briefly. This is a little woodland footpath that runs through and is used quite heavily by residents since the, well, it's always been used quite heavily by residents, but since the building on the playing fields nearby, it's become even more heavily used. It's only become a public right-of-way recently. An application to make it a public right-of-way was filed in the late 1980s. It was subsequently lost in a filing cabinet in between the move to a county council. So it came back to us this year. It was found again, and because the application had been put in the late 1980s, we had to find people who had used it extensively for the designated period prior to the application being put in, not prior to the time we've heard now. So we had to people who used it from the late 80s going back to 20, 30 years, whatever the period is, and that was an incredibly easy process. We had people coming out of the woodwork from all over the area. This is a very, well entrenched public amenity that a lot of people have a lot of pride in.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions at that point. So yes, I'll just thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. We could move on then to if anybody's got any questions of officers at this point. Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to ask if there's any chance we could take a 5-minute comfort break, I'm afraid.
I'm sure we can accommodate that. If web hosting are with us.
That's usually my claim.
We're here, Chair.
Would that be okay if we could just take 5 minutes at this point?
It's totally fine.
Yeah. Are you able to do what needs to be done? I think if we all switch our videos off. Right, welcome back, everybody. I think I was just about to ask if any members had any sort of further questions for the planning officers. If you could just raise your hands if you do. I'm not seeing any, so if we're happy to move straight into debate, if anybody would like to make a start. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that was a game of who blinks first. Personally, I was very undecided on this application coming into tonight. Read through the papers. I listened with a lot of interest to what the sort of the technical people on the call were telling us. Personally, however, I feel that the loss of these mature trees, the loss of this wildlife corridor is not acceptable, and it is highlighted throughout the papers, really, of the issues that losing these trees will have. And it is also highlighted how that does go against our own policies and the York local plan, and indeed in places in the national planning policy framework as well. So for me personally, I don't think that alternatives have been explored successfully, and therefore in this particular situation I'd like to move for refusal.
Thank you. I'll just ask at this point then if anybody's willing to second that. Councillor Melly.
Yes, I agree that in the balance, I personally am not convinced that all the other options have been fully explored, and that they're not completely unreasonable or unavailable, and the harm caused to the amenity of the public right of way and to the habitat of the wildlife corridor. Yeah, I feel the same. I'm happy to second refusal.
Thank you. So that's been proposed and seconded. I can see Councillor Galvin, you've got your hand up as well at this point. I think probably the first thing to do is just explore a bit more the reasons for refusal, and just make sure that if that is the way the committee is minded, that those are sufficient. So I guess if I could ask Gareth just to help us out with this one, in essence. I think we've heard a bit from Councillor Webb and Councillor Melly. Is there a form of words or some policy we can hang that on?
Well, it's an issue of the planning balance, Chair. We've looked at this as officers, and we feel that they have demonstrated that there aren't alternative sites which are reasonably available to them, and the loss of the trees is outweighed by that need. And we've looked at obviously the category of trees to be removed, and then the replacement that are to be provided. But it is a matter of judgment, and it's a matter of balance. So if members feel that the opposite, then the policies that we quote to say that they are in accordance with those policies, then they can be used in the opposite way. If you don't feel that that need is there, and that the loss of those trees outweighs the benefits of the development. So sorry, I'm just looking through I guess it's policy NE1 is the main one in terms of protecting trees and woodlands. But I think as what Councillor Webb talks about in terms of the loss of mature trees and the harm to the wildlife corridor, they're reasonable if members wish to go down that line.
Thank you. I'll just then ask if Councillor Webb, Councillor Melly, if there are any further sort of points you want to raise into that, or whether you're happy with those reasons essentially as.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think for me, as Gareth's right, this is a balancing act, isn't it? And I think, you know, throughout the papers, I mean, for example, if we look at, policy GP1 was certainly one I was looking at, but also, sorry, any one. And then as well as that, potentially policy GI1, policy DP3, which talks about green spaces and landscape and protecting, enhancing the natural environment. I think policy GI4 supports development that provides protection for overall tree coverage. So I think that's important to note as well. As well as that, let me just check. I think there was one more. Section 15, the National Planning Policy Framework, you know, protects the natural environment. Planning decisions should recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside and the benefits of trees and woodland. So they're sort of the points that I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, then we do have a proposal which has been seconded with, I think, sufficient reasons to take it to a vote. I do have 4 speakers, and I'll just give the 4 speakers an opportunity, and then we can probably put this to the vote. First, then I've got Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, thank you. I'm quite amazed and astounded, Chair, at the negative attitude towards this application. Quite clearly, there's no argument about it that the new substation will definitely have an effect on that section of wooded area. How serious that effect is, I'm not sold that it's such a huge issue. What is more important, as far as I'm concerned, is the need of the university. We either laud and appreciate what the university is doing for our city and encourage them to do whatever they can, or we just say, no, we're not terribly interested. I don't know much about electricity other than that if I get 2 wires bare and I touch them, I get a kick like a mule, or the fuse blows. So I listen to the experts because they know far more about this than I will ever know. And certainly I know nothing about main water supplies that are going through, I think, the car park at the bottom of the land. So I have to accept, and you may think it's foolish for me to accept, but I have to accept what the experts tell me. And Councillor Webb is quite right. It is purely a question of balance. In all honesty, it's got nothing to do whether it's the right side, the wrong side, or whether it can be moved this way or that way. It is a question of planning balance. And it is a question of how we recognise the needs of the university. And if I listen to the information correctly, the needs of the local community who also get a supply from this facility. And so I'm quite appalled, Chair, at the negative attitude towards this application, and there is no way I can support refusal. As I said at the beginning, I know a little bit about trees, I know a little bit about the ecology, and whatever man does, whether he digs the allotment over in a different way, we all affect the ecology in our daily lives. And this is going to be affected. I would argue, and I'm not an academic ecologist, but I would argue that any damage that's done to the ecology will very quickly repair itself within the next 10 or 15 years. And quite frankly, if that is the cost of having this equipment put there, then I'm quite happy and prepared to accept that cost. So I in no way, Chair, can I support the refusal of this application?
Thank you. Move on then to Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I too am somewhat conflicted by this application. What I think it does do, it highlights the failure of the university in the past to really look at its long-term energy needs in terms of renewable energy generation as the East Campus was built out. I think they could have done far more for that. But that, unfortunately, is history. The university's needs are clear. They need extra capacity. And the fact they serve some of the wider residents in the area means that there could be serious dangers that at peak times there could be overloads and power cuts. I don't see that there are other sites that are suitable. I think there may have been in the past, but I'm not convinced that they still exist. If it has to be close, the switchgear has to be close to the primary substation, this really is the only point that they can do. As for the wood, a healthy wood, which provides a good ecology, requires trees at all stages of growth. It requires trees that are mature, it requires trees that are semi-mature, and it requires whips and small saplings which are going to grow to replace the mature trees as they die. And the fact is that in order to sequester carbon, you need trees that are growing. Mature trees do not sequester carbon. They take in carbon through photosynthesis, they release it through respiration, and they also drop leaves which then rot and release methane and carbon back into the atmosphere. So if you want a wood tree that is going to sequester carbon and contribute to combating climate change, you need growing trees. That's why I feel that actually there is an opportunity here by replacing the trees that are cut down with semi-mature whips and semi-matures. There is an opportunity to actually benefit our fight against climate change. At the same time, I accept that mature trees are by far the best habitat for wildlife. They provide roofs, good roofs for birds. They provide nesting sites for birds. They provide dead wood that will benefit wood-boring insects. So it's a balance. On balance, I think the 30 trees will compensate for the ones that have been cut down. And consequently, with a heavy heart, I'm going to have to say I cannot oppose this application. I will not vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, yeah, like everybody's saying, you know, this is about the balance, and I think there are some quite difficult things to weigh up within this, not least the 4,000 customers that were mentioned who potentially have their power supply interrupted whilst any work's going on. I think there are a few points that I feel uneasy about, though, within what we've heard this evening. I mean, I think the first of which was, you know, the primary alternate, you know, an alternative primary station being too expensive at 4 to 5 million, but then it being clear that actually the works here were probably going to be costing in the same order. And I appreciate that that doesn't get new switching gear onto this primary substation, but it did feel a little bit like it was too expensive to do something over here because that didn't suit us, but actually we're quite happy to spend the money over in this location because that's what we're wanting to do. I'm also very uneasy about the suggestion that because the university is paying an additional cost on top of its energy, that it's somehow using green energy. My understanding is that that's actually a subsidy to renewable energies, but because it draws its energy from the grid, and because we don't know whether the energy that's gone in to the grid is from nuclear or from coal or from gas or from wind turbines, whatever it's come from, it's not really a fair thing to say that, you know, they're using green energy. They're making a subsidy towards green energy, and that's great. I very much welcome that. But it is a little bit bordering on greenwashing, I think, to suggest that that's what's going on. But I think, and I suppose the other point I would just want to make, which is slightly a retort to Councillor Galvin in a way. You know, I'm the same. I'm not an energy expert. I'm not an electricity expert. But we did also hear from an ecology expert who was very clear in terms of saying that actually it could take 30 to 50 years to replace the ecological corridor at this location by what's being suggested. Although I think after some of the questions that I'd asked about the maturity of trees that could be planted, and having heard from the applicant that there's perhaps going to be more trees and a more diverse range of trees. It's the tightest of tightest balances, I have to say, for me, but I think I am erring on the side of feeling that I have to support the application. But I'm waiting for the other two speakers to see if they switch me the other way around yet, because I'm not entirely made up.
Let's find out. Councillor Crackhill.
Oh dear. Yeah, I mean, I agree with people who said it's very difficult, a very difficult one to decide, because I suppose my impression before we started discussing this was that I might find that, yes, regrettably, I would have to support this, because I understand that our electricity grid is, a lot of it is old and it does need renewing, and we need to do quite a lot of work on that in the context of our climate policies, actually. But I found that the more that I've heard tonight, the more I feel, as other speakers have said, that I'm not convinced that the alternatives have all been fully investigated or fully presented to us. We've heard that the new switching gear actually takes up less space than the old switching gear, and I understand absolutely there's the issue of the risk to the 4,000 or so properties. Now, I would have liked to have had more information to understand that more fully about how that could be managed. I don't think we had full answers on that, whether that actually could be managed in some way to do it in situ. I don't really know from what's been provided. And I just think on the planning balance, it isn't at all clear that this actually has to happen here, and that we lose the trees. So at the trees and the ecology, as we heard, not just single trees, but the ecology and the impacts on the wildlife corridor, which we also heard about. So I think, as again, on that very slim balance, I think I will not support the application.
Thank you. I do now have Councillor Melly and Councillor Webb again. Obviously, having already spoken, if you could try and keep it brief. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to, in terms of debate, respond to some of the things that people have said. Just that mature trees doesn't necessarily mean fully grown. A mature tree can still grow in terms of height and width. I think that the University of York and Northern Power Grid have fiscal responsibilities to explore whatever the least expensive option is, and it's up to us to determine whether this is an option for them. In my view, it isn't. I think that as a committee, we haven't been provided enough evidence to really be able to say that the other options aren't viable. They may be more expensive, but I'm not convinced that's a planning consideration, and I'm not convinced that that is justification for permanently damaging a wildlife corridor. So that's all I was just going to add to the debate before we vote.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to use this opportunity to knock back some of the comments that Councillor Galvin sort of levelled at me. I think, firstly, I totally understand that there is, in any development, there is always some risk, and in a development such as this, or a proposal such as this, there would be a risk to local residents and the university. Whenever you do anything by digging a hole and affecting a cable, that's going to have an impact. However, I want to point out that the speaker themselves said that in other sites, in other similar situations, they have taken that risk and essentially built it on the same site, and then that wouldn't have the impact on these trees. So it can be done, and they said that themselves. That's not me, that's them. And I just think that I totally agree with what Councillor Melly's just said about the fact that whilst there might be an option that might prove to be slightly more expensive, a small cost now is far better than a large cost from constantly just removing a few more trees, a few more mature trees, a bit more of the wildlife corridor. That constant trickle effect has a big impact in the long term. And I think finally, I'd just say, Councillor Galvin, you say you're no energy expert, but you are a tree expert. Well, where do you think the energy on this planet comes from? I mean, it comes from the sun via the trees. That is fundamentally how it works. So I think we do need to think about this. We do need to have that thought, and happy to move to a vote now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We just got Councillor Fisher first.
Thank you. I'd just like to actually just quote what the definition of mature tree is from a tree website I've just seen. It says a tree that has reached its desired size or age, completing natural development or growth. So consequently, I think when I talk about mature trees, they're not growing anymore. They're mature. They're not taking any more carbon in and sequestering it. So, you know, what we want are growing trees. We want semi-matures, because if you look at the way a tree grows, the whips don't do anything in the first few years as far as carbon sequestration. As they get to a reasonable height and start to put on girth, that's when they sequester carbon. In the later years, as they grow towards maturity, they sequester very little. So, you know, I stand by what I say. We want some semi-matures and smaller trees to grow on this site. The other thing about trees you learn very rapidly is they're very, very closely clustered, as lots of these sycamores are. They impede each other's growth and get in the way of other trees. I'm managing woodland at the moment with a friend, and I'm learning a lot about woodland management. And trees that are very close together do not grow efficiently, and eventually they just become spindly and pointless. So we need to manage this woodland. I look at it, and I've looked at the picture of it. It is a woodland that has not been managed for a very considerable time. It needs human intervention to actually make it better.
Thank you. And Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, I just want to counter this. Look, I'm not an ecologist, but I am a practical woodland manager. I have been in the past. And I do understand how woodlands, how thickets, how hedges, and how that kind of land works. And I can tell you, and you're quite right, Councillor Fisher is quite right, the fact that you can clear a whole swathe of trees in a complete felling operation, and the ecology carries on, perhaps in a different form, and eventually grows back up again. So let's get away from this nonsense that we are creating ecological vandalism. We're not creating ecological vandalism. We're having to live in the 21st century. And as far as I'm concerned, as I said before, the damage will be, in 5 or 6 years, will be totally minimal. And yes, you might have a few less spiders per meter or a few less bugs per meter, but they will all come back. And one looks at, I don't know, I haven't walked through this piece of land, but I was when Gareth did the site yesterday. And I have to say to you, when you look at the vandalism that's going on and the rubbish that was kicking about, I'm not sure who has pride in this strip of land, but that's another story. So come on, I have some knowledge of how these things work, and I do have some knowledge of woodland management. As I said, I know nothing about electricity generation at all.
Okay, thank you. I think we probably can now move to the vote. For my own part, I won't be supporting the refusal. It's pretty clear to me that this is a necessary development for the university, and it's pretty clear as well that, you know, the alternatives have been looked into pretty robustly, and this is the only location. And given those two things, we've got to weigh the need for development and the lack of alternative sites against the loss of a relatively small number of trees, which in my view can be adequately replaced. So I won't be supporting the refusal at this time. But Gareth, if you're able to give us a sort of summary of where we are at the moment, and Michelle, if you sort of in the background to take the vote when we're ready, please.
Chair, so it's been moved that the application be refused because of an unacceptable loss of protected trees, leading to a harm to local amenity and the green corridor, and alternatives have not been fully, alternatives to the development have not been fully explored. And this would be contrary to policy GI4, GI1, DP3 of the emerging local plan, policy 1 of the Development Control Local Plan and the provisions of section 15 of the NPPF.
Okay, thank you. Could I just ask as well then that everybody could just indicate that they've heard the whole debate? If you could just raise your hand. Yeah, fantastic. Michelle, if you're able to conduct the vote for us, please.
A motion to refuse this application has been proposed by Councillor Webb and seconded by Councillor Melly. Members, please can you state whether you'll be voting for, against or abstaining? Councillor Crackhill.
For.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Regrettably against.
Councillor Cullig.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Galvin. Councillor Galvin.
Sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself. I shouted to myself. Against.
And Councillor Melly.
For.
Councillor Orrell.
Against.
Councillor Perrett.
For.
Councillor Wardby.
Against.
Councillor Webb.
For.
Councillor Hollier.
Against.
So that motion to refuse has been lost. There's 7 that have voted for, and sorry, my apologies, 4 had voted for and 7 had voted against.
Thank you, Michelle. If I could ask then, anybody else willing to put a alternative motion? Councillor Garvin.
Chairman, I move the proposal to approve the application as per the decision on the papers.
Thank you. Is anybody willing to second that? Councillor Colwick.
Yes, I'm willing to second that. I can't say that I'm not conflicted over this, just as others have expressed, including Councillor Crawshaw. But given that things have progressed as they have with the previous decision, I think we clearly need to move forward now to vote for approval.
Thank you. Yep, so that's proposed and seconded. I can't see anybody else wishing to speak. So, Michelle.
Yep. So that's a motion to.
Sorry, Michelle, just before we do that, if Gareth could just give us a very quick summary, and I'll assume we don't need to raise hand things again.
Excuse me. Chair, the motion is to approve the application subject to the conditions on pages 27, 28 and 29 of the report.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, Michelle. If you...
So, members, please state whether you'll be voting for, against or abstaining. Councillor Craighill.
Against.
Councillor Crawshaw.
For.
Councillor Cullig.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Regrettably for.
Councillor Galvin.
For.
Councillor Melly.
Against.
Councillor Orrell.
For.
Councillor Perrett.
Against.
Councillor Wardby.
For.
Councillor Webb.
Against.
And Councillor Hollier.
For.
And so that is carried.
Okay, thank you. So that is approved. If we could, so it's 6:30 now. I think 15 minutes, if that's okay. So if we're back by 6:45, members could just turn the cameras off and join the breakout room. Right, welcome back everybody. If we move straight on then to item 4B, which is 54 Scarcroft Hill. And Gareth, if you're able to.
Sorry, Chair, it's Heidi Lehane from Legal. I was just wondering about the issue of Vice
sorry,
Chair,
yes. Yeah.
whether you could deal with that first before the application, or would you like to do it after the presentation?
We can do it now, shouldn't we?
Okay, just so we didn't forget. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, sorry. So Councillor Crawshaw hasn't rejoined us for the reasons mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. I think Councillor Webb, you indicated you were happy to sort of sub as vice chair for this item. I guess if people could just indicate they're sort of happy with that, thumbs up, wave. That's great. I think that's that then. So sorry, Gareth. Yes, if you could carry on from there.
Thank you, Chair. There's no update for this application, Chair. It's as written in the printed agenda papers. It's a retrospective application of permission to change of use of a Class 3 dwelling house to a Class C4 HMO with 6 bedrooms. And the areas within the Central Historic Core Conservation Area and the on-street, there's an on-street permit parking scheme which operates 9 till 5 Monday to Friday. I'll just share my screen to go through the presentation. So there we are. So that's the image at the front of the property. The layout showing the 6 bedrooms. The block plan shows the location of the cycle storage and the waste and recycling. There's a photograph of the cycle storage which would have been implemented. It's a photograph along Scarcroft Hill towards the Knavesmire, and then there's a photograph up Scarcroft Hill in the other direction. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, if I just ask if members have got any sort of questions based on the images, if you could just raise Councillor Webb.
Thank you. I suppose just while we've got this picture of cars in front of us here, it's a residence parking scheme, and there is something through the report about, you know, you would expect such a property to have maximum of 3 cars, I guess, 2 cars to 3 cars. Is there any way to sort of limit the property in terms of how many parking permits they can take, or how that would work? Yeah, that's my question really regarding the parking.
With an HMO, they are allowed 1 permit per tenancy agreement. So potentially there could be 6. But the information we have is there's been no impact on the number of parking permits issued as a result of this retrospective change.
And there's no way that we can put a condition in or something like that to limit the number. So you could say it's maximum of 3 per this dwelling or something like that.
I don't think so, because I'm not quite sure how you would how that would be enforceable, because they have through a different regime, they have a right to apply for a permit. I'm not quite sure that we could impose a planning condition which said that you know that only the first 3 residents, for example, could apply. I don't think that would be enforceable in planning terms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any more questions, Gareth, so I think we're free to take it down. Okay. I can see John now waving. Councillor Gavin?
It's only a very simple one. Where's the access for the cycle storage? Is it on the back lane, Gareth? I tried to work it out.
Yes, there's a. I think it might show up better on the Ordnance Survey plan on page 57. So you can see the rear access comes. It loops around from.
That's fine. That's
beside a number 60.
I've missed that. I'm sorry. I've been looking at the presentation. Yeah, that's fine. I was just curious. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Wardby.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really sorry. I have to ask Gareth. I'm not trying to catch you out, but on car parking on 5.15, it might be that I don't understand it, but it says there's one space per 2 HMO bedrooms. So I thought that would make 3 car parking spaces, but I'm not sure.
That's a reference to our parking standards. So
they can still have 6. Is that
in terms of the residence parking permit scheme? Yes, they could apply for 6. We've used our parking standards, although obviously because this property doesn't have any off-street parking, so it's perhaps a bit of a misnomer. Just as a general indication of how many cars we would expect from this type of development.
Thank you. So in the pictures, obviously it shows that there's not many spaces. Is there actually spaces for 6 cars, or
Well, it's I think in common with a lot of our inner area parking zones, it's oversubscribed. There are more permits issued than there are theoretical spaces to park. But our view and the view of our highways colleagues is that the impact will be likely to be neutral.
But that's the norm. Yeah, that it's overprescribed.
It's not uncommon in certainly in most of the inner area parking zones. So I understand.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Chair, can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure, go.
Sorry, just to ask a question about people in the house. There's a query about 7 people, but there's only 6 bedrooms. I'm concerned that if anybody has a partner that goes in, are we providing enough for cycles, space and that for them as well? Or are they not allowed partners?
The planning system, thankfully, doesn't go into that level of detail. In terms of the use class C4 would only allow for 6 permanent residents, and that's what the planning application seeks approval for. It wouldn't, temporary visitors would not, in my view, result in a breach of that. But if someone was moving in there more permanently or semi-permanently, I would say that would be something that would probably breach the condition.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Thank you. Councillor Melly.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to check, is the cycle storage provision included in the submitted site plan and floor plan? Or it doesn't look like it has a separate condition, so I just wanted to check that it is included in the existing plans and conditions.
I don't think there's a condition because it's already there. And it is shown, it was detailed on the submitted drawings. So it is part of it's kind of part of the application, but they're not applying for it because it's already in existence, I guess. But it is it is shown on the submitted drawings that came with the application.
I just want to be sure that it won't, at some point in the future, be removed from existence
and then that can't be enforced against because it's not explicit in the planning permission?
But a condition could be put on to prevent its removal. I'm not quite sure why they would seek to remove it, but that would be an option that's available to the planning authority if he felt it was reasonable.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions, so if we're able then to move on to our public speakers. The first of which is Mr. Tony O'Hagan. If you could let us know you're there, please.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. You'll have heard you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, but if you could stay on the line as well after you've spoken, just in case there's any questions, but if you're happy to start in your own time.
Yeah, thanks. So we live next door to the property and object to the change of use. So there's 3 main areas I just wanted to talk through. So firstly, as I detailed out in my letter to the planning officer, the applicant, Mr. Webster, has actually not made any attempt to discuss any aspect of this planning with any neighbours and has in fact avoided answering any of the questions. The council's enforcement officer wrote to Mr. Webster twice stating he should not proceed as use for an HMO, but he moved tenants in on the 1st of September and with no planning permission. Planning was only submitted on the 23rd of September, so this should be seen as a retrospective application. There are a number of discrepancies in the application for example, the cycle storage that we're talking about, it states that it's an existing structure, or I'm requesting for planning permission for it. In fact, Mr. Webster constructed that new and permanent structure on the 8th of September. So therefore it is new and it's 2.2 metres high and 3.55 metres wide as per the drawings. I believe planning is required for this, but none's been sought. Secondly, on parking, there's been a large number of objections lodged on parking and neighbours have reported an increase in cars. There are no dedicated HMO parking bays. A 6 to 7 household, as you say, is somewhere between 3 and 4 cars, but as you identified, it could be up to 6 plus guests on top of that. The experience from the residents are that there are already more parking issues being seen. And I guess I'm unclear as to what process there is to control the number of vehicles associated with this property. And then third, I guess, and most importantly, the amenity and whether there's any impact on the level of amenity neighbouring residents can reasonably expect to enjoy. And it's fair to say the change of use is a significant change of use. It is out of character with the streets. The area is dominated by families located in the middle of 4 schools. And really what we need is more quality family housing, not actually reducing it. The change to 6 or 7 unrelated adults households is significant. As part of the proposal, the ground floor living room and dining rooms are converted into bedrooms. And we all know that families use different parts of the house at different times. But given there's only one communal kitchen space, it means that the bedrooms are in constant use as living and sleeping areas. All of these bedrooms, including these new ground floor ones, are joined directly onto our property. This over-intense use is and will continue to have an adverse effect on our amenity, and we are already experiencing increased noise levels.
It's 30 seconds left.
I know the planning officer recommends a management plan, and this was the same recommendation in a previous application from Mr. Webb, so related to 51 Russell Street. I'd like to see what that plan includes, but given the tenants have already been in place now for over 3 months with no planning permission in place, and during this time the applicants made no attempt to share any plan or provide even contact details, plus the disregard for the planning process that we're in because this is retrospective, I really doubt that that's a meaningful solution. So I believe the overall scale of this proposal is over-dominant, detrimental to the amenity of neighbouring families and should be reduced, and therefore request that it's rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just hang on, I'll just ask if the committee have any questions. I can't see any, so I'll just thank you for your time this evening and just say that the committee will obviously consider your comments as we come to a decision on this application.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we could move on then to Mrs. Patricia Gill.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm also an immediate neighbour to 54 Scarcroft Hill, and our greatest concerns regarding its use to an HMO are firstly noise and secondly our recourse if we have any issues with the tenants. Noise carries through into our kitchen diner from number 54's open plan kitchen sitting room, which is a rear extension, which now the property is an HMO, is the only proper reception room because the other is just a small study. Multiple individual adult occupants socialising in this room impacts on us. Number 54's extension construction is such that we can actually see their lights through the party wall at the rear of our house. Our kitchen diner is an important social area for us in the day and the evening. Our garden is also a main social area for us and our young children during warmer weather. And during September, the rear patio doors of number 54 were frequently open and we could hear swearing from the kitchen, which is clearly unsuitable for our young children to listen to, and we've had to bring them in from playing in the garden as a result. We consider it is unreasonable for this property to be an HMO at the expense of ours and our children's enjoyment of our small garden and kitchen diner. This is not a reflection of the current student tenants, but just a reflection on the amenity level previously enjoyed prior to the property being let as an HMO. The walls between the Scarcroft Hill properties are not good at blocking noise. Conversations are easily heard in the hallway, along with people walking up the stairs and people speaking, music being played in the bedrooms. We can hear the front door slamming every time people enter or leave the property, which is more frequent with 6 or 7 adults. Furthermore, as already demonstrated on the night of Saturday, the 12th of September, not surprisingly, students go out, drink and come home late at 1:30 a.m. in this case, and are not quiet on their return. They woke both us and our young children, and we can only expect this to be more frequent occurrence outside of COVID lockdown measures. Secondly, we have concerns about the landlord and the property agent dealing with any issues. Giles Webster and his family moved out of 54 Scarcroft Hill on the weekend of the 8th and 9th of August with no warning and without speaking to us. We made multiple attempts to ask Giles what was happening, but he did not respond to any text messages or emails that we sent to him. We found out about the change of use to an HMO by asking some of the tradespeople in the house, fitting a fire alarm on the 11th of August. Giles has been our neighbour for approximately 10 years and we've been on good terms during this period. This behaviour makes us feel like we will have limited recourse if we have issues with the residents of the HMO. Also, Adam Bennett Lettings refused to speak to us regarding the use of number 54 as an HMO, quoting GDPR as the reason for not discussing it. This is very different and a much more concerning situation for us than having a family as neighbours. So we would like this to be refused. Thank you.
I'll just check if there are any questions from the committee. Councillor Colwick. I think you're still on mute. You're back on mute.
I'll try again.
There you go.
Okay. Just to clarify, if you will, you said something about seeing the lights in the property through the party wall, or did I misunderstand you?
Yes, it's actually, it was just to describe the construction of it. It's actually through our shed, which is the back joining part to our kitchen. You can actually see there's the lights through to the neighbouring property. It's just an indication that it's an extension and it doesn't have the same level of construction as some of the other parts of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions, so similarly, I'll thank you for your time this evening, Mrs. Gill, and yes, the committee will obviously consider your comments as we further consider this application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, then we've got Mr. Adam Bennett, who's the managing agent for the property. I've got a note, Mr. Bennett, that you're just using the 3 minutes just to answer any questions.
That's correct. That's correct.
So if you've not got a sort of prepared speech, I'll move straight to.
I've got a very short. Sorry, I've got a very short statement, and then I'm available to take any questions to try and help answer any of the queries that people have got.
Okay. If you'd like to make a start.
Good evening, all. My name is Adam Bennett. I'm the appointed managing agent for this property. I fully support the officer's report and its recommendation for approval. I would like to use the 3 minutes allocated to answer any questions that the members might have in regards to the management of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, would you like to go first?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Bennett. Could you first outline why we're talking about retrospective permission here? What was it that meant that we could send people in September and it didn't feel necessary to actually approach the council for permission first? And then if you could just outline what specifically you're putting in place in terms of the management plan, in terms of garden maintenance, refuse and cycling facilities and property maintenance, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The window of opportunity in an ideal world, if we didn't have what's been going on at the moment, we would lay out an application, get the thing granted, and then we'd then move on to subsequently filling it with the amount of people that we've been allocated by the appropriate grant or not, if that was the case. The window of opportunity we had with people looking to rent the house, the options were that the family that owned the house were moving out on very short notice, and they had an option to try and sell the house. And with what was happening with the COVID-19 and sort of the collapse of things to do with that, or the option to add it to their portfolio for the time being, it was easier to rent the house out, test the water really, to see if there was anybody willing to live in that area, of which we were inundated by sort of people that could see that was a really good area to live in and that they'd like to live there. It might have been the case that when we advertised it, we got absolutely zero interest in it. So that would have dragged out a very lengthy planning application just to sort of test the water. So I'm sorry it's a little bit one before the other, but I don't think we've actually technically done anything wrong in doing that. And we have, of course, brought this in front of the committee as soon as humanly possible to remedy that.
Thank you. Just on that point, I believe Councillor Crawshaw's brought this before the committee.
Sorry, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And I suppose you can appreciate that it doesn't necessarily put you or landlords in the best light when we're having to deal with this as retrospective. I'm sure you can appreciate that. The other points about the management, if you could just go into some detail around them, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, just to finish off on the other point, we house over 2,000 students per annum in York, and we've got houses pretty much broadly all over the centre. It's not necessary that we always apply for planning permission. Sometimes, people, it depends on the neighbourhood. If people are bothered, then it might not be a case that we have to apply for planning permission. We usually do, and we usually get the things granted. As regards the management, with it being a licensed HMO, we are heavily under the control of City of York Council's Environmental Health Department, where as an agent and the owner, we have to have a license to run the property. The license lasts for 5 years. We have to adhere for the conduct of our tenants on and off the premises and in the local area. So if they were to cause nuisance or something like that, then our license could be revoked if we haven't remedied it. So we can't basically cause a great nuisance and get away with it, because over the top of us all the time, our environmental health, who have the right to fine us vast amounts of money and remove our license, and then when the renewal comes up every 5 years, they can imply additional measures onto that license if they don't think that we're running it correctly. And they also have the power to take the management away from myself and the owner and manage it themselves. So we have to do things correctly, and we have to sort of play fairly, because if we don't, the end result of that is that all people have to do is report us to environmental health, put a good case forward to them of what we're not doing that we should be doing, and then we've got a lot to answer to with the City of York Council's Environmental Health Department. They don't mess about. They take no prisoners. If you mess them about, they come down very heavy on you.
Okay, Councillor Webb, is this a follow-up?
So to be clear, your management plan is basically don't lose your license. It's do the things that are the minimum expectation so you don't do that. Don't lose that license through licensing. And in terms of planning, yes, you've taken the licensing side of things, but you're not seem to be taking the planning side seriously.
Well, we do take planning very, very seriously. I'd like to, I can think of the first property, one of the first properties I applied for in the City of York, and that was in 2001 when it wasn't necessary to have or apply for planning permission. That's a property that I own in Micklegate. That still is a HMO, and I've got numerous high-profile buildings across York that I own and manage, including Grade 2 listed buildings that are licensed HMOs. So we do take it extremely serious, and we do take the management of it extremely serious as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just trying to demonstrate that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Councillor Colwick.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bennett, I might have misheard or misunderstood, but if so, I don't think I was the only member of this committee, judging by the reaction on the faces of many others, when you seem to say that to apply for lawful use of a property was not something that was always done. It seemed to be that you were saying many people, many areas, many streets are really not too bothered about this. And whilst I can understand that where properties were already in use as shared houses or HMOs prior to April 2012, when the Article 4 directive was introduced, I think to introduce new HMOs since that date without applying for change of use it seems to be that you were saying that happens quite regularly, and that by implication you manage a number of properties in the York area which are operating without that permission and without change of use having been sought. Did I misunderstand, or is that the case? And if so, how many are we talking about?
I think sorry, just before you answer there, just if you could answer very briefly, because I don't want to get too far off this particular application, because obviously sorry, Heidi's just
I also feel we're straying away from the application that we should be considering here. The morals behind it are a separate issue, so if you could keep it very brief, and then perhaps we could move on to dealing with the application at hand.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I'll just clarify. I was talking about not new ones. I was talking about probably the 2,000 student houses that were in York before the Article 4 directive came in. There's very few of those properties that we've been asked to apply for a retrospective application. I'm sorry, I didn't make myself clear. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, thank you for the clarification there. And if we move on then to Councillor Craghill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask you, thinking about the management plan, if you could respond to the comments made by at least one of the speakers, if not both, that it was difficult to know how that you hadn't really that they would like to have a good process for being able to contact you and to get responses from you when they have problems, when they feel that there might be problems with the tenants. Is that part of your management plan, to provide information about how to contact you and then to take action to resolve the problem?
Absolutely. As part of the licensing conditions, a 24-hour contact details are supplied to the Environmental Health Department as part of the licensing conditions, and they publish those on the web. It's a document that you can visit in the council's offices, and on top of that, if you Google it, you can find it online, and you'll see who the managing agent is, and you'll see the contact number. That's my personal mobile number, and it's switched on 24 hours a day.
So you wouldn't.
If I get called up at 2 o'clock in the morning by a neighbour saying that the students next door are having a party, you can imagine, I've got small children myself, I'm not best pleased. So, we don't mess about with them. We try very, very hard to make sure that people do behave themselves. And the other thing we do, because we handle such a large amount of people, when we've got something that's a quieter street like this one, we don't try to find the youngest, rowdiest people possible. You find that younger students that are rowdy like that, more like the first years moving to the second years, are more likely wanting to be in an area that's highly populated with students and not in something which probably looks very similar to where they came from home. You know, we've got usually things like this go to very quiet international students or postgraduates that want to live in a quiet street. You know, they're serious about studying, they're serious about, you know, how they conduct themselves. The younger ones want to live near more densely populated areas such as Offall Road, Badger Hill, those kind of areas. But yeah, we take it very seriously, and wherever possible, we pre-warn them, you know, that prior to them signing for the property, there is a quiet neighbourhood and there'll sort of be a zero tolerance on noise.
Right, but in terms of the neighbours being able to get in touch with your company, you're saying that information is somewhere on the council website? They have to go and look for it. Do you not actively make it available to neighbours?
If they can go, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I can answer that one. If they go through to our website, there's a 24-hour-a-day phone number, which again is my personal mobile number on the website under the contact detail. There's also a report maintenance page. So if there was some maintenance issue that was, let's say, I don't know, a garden gate that was banging in the wind and the students had gone home for Christmas, they could report that on there, and that immediately goes out as that maintenance request to 4 members of staff, and it gets picked up by the person that's nearest to it. So the website's been monitored constantly for maintenance requests, and my number's published on my website, and it's also published on the council's website. But I'm quite happy to hand my phone number over to anyone that wants it. It's readily available.
Okay,
right,
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Webb, have you got a follow-up here?
Yeah, I just want to point out, as one of the councillors for the Tang Hall area, I just want to say that that's not an area where you can, that's the rowdy area where we can send students. You know, I'm just going to point that one out right now and leave it there. Okay,
thank you. And I can't see any further questions, Mr. Bennett. So, yeah, thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions from the committee for planning officers? I can see Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? We've seen this as a retrospective application. Now, if we think about that, does it not mean that we have to consider this as if it was a completely fresh application and not actually take into account that there has been a breach of planning regulations the last 4 months?
That's correct. You can't take into account the fact that it's retrospective in terms of making a decision on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Colwick.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I fully understand the intervention to my question, saying that we have to focus on the application in hand, I think the question I was asking is actually quite a relevant one. And what seems to very rarely, if ever, be taken into account is the fact that there were so many established shared houses prior to April 2012. And by no means all of those are located by the City of York Council. We have some idea through the council tax records, and that's picked up on page 50 of the report in paragraph 5.6. But there are many shared houses which are not entirely occupied by students. There may be even just one sharer in a property who's not a student. And in those instances, the properties are subject to council tax. So when we're basing our policy on, and there is a question coming here, it's not just a statement. When we're basing our policy on the percentage of properties which are HMOs within a given area prior to the application, the paucity of our knowledge around that does not make for good decision making. And therefore questions around, well, in fact, how many HMOs are there within this area which are not already known by the City of York Council is quite a relevant thing to pursue. And I wonder whether officers are able to give us any kind of shed any light on this, given that our policy relies so much upon the percentage of properties already operating as HMOs within a given locality and within 100 metres of the property in question. And therefore, I think my questioning was actually quite relevant, not just to this application, but to every similar application that comes before this committee.
Thank you. Gareth, are you able to?
Yeah, well, I mean, we accept that the database is not going to be 100% accurate, but we use council tax records, which picks up student exemptions. We use the licensing records for licensed HMOs. Those properties that already have planning permission or are subject to subject of a certificate of lawfulness, and then there are other properties that we know to be HMOs which don't necessarily fall into those categories, and that would be, for example, where we have had complaints about their operation or the fact that they're in existence, and following a investigation by the enforcement officers, we found that it would seem very likely that they had been in existence prior to the Article 4 being brought into effect. So we've got a pretty broad knowledge of how many there are in the city, and I think as good as we're ever going to get. And in this particular location, we don't have any records of any HMO properties within 100 metres of this one. And as members will be aware, the threshold here is 10%.
Thank you. Councillor Craghill.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if it's possible in the condition 3 about the management plan to add something that requires the agent or whoever to ensure that they have a system in place for responding I suppose responding to issues raised by neighbours. Is there some form of wording that we can put in to require that? I was a bit surprised the speaker said it would go to his own phone. I think people would rather it, went to the staff of the managing agent. But whatever. Is there just some brief wording we can put in?
I think he was the managing agent, which is why he said it went to his phone. I think under 3.1, the information and advice to occupants about noise and consideration to neighbours, there's no reason, if members feel it reasonable, for your wording in terms of a system in place for responding to complaints. There's no reason why that can't be added in.
Thank you. Councillor Corwick, are you just coming in on this point?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It seemed to me, and I'm sure to others, that when the agent was talking about neighbours contacting the agent, there would be no obvious way that neighbours would know who the agent was. Clearly, the occupants, the tenants, know who the agent is, but neighbours would have no way of knowing who the managing agent of a property is. And I wonder, therefore, with the question that was being asked there by Councillor Craghill, whether again, is there anything within the management of a property that would require neighbours to have a knowledge of the managing agent and who to contact with issues?
Let me think about that one. I guess I don't think it would be reasonable for us to require that the neighbours are told of who manages the premises. I can't think of any similar corresponding requirements outside of HMO controls where we seek that sort of advertising. But I'm not aware that it's been brought up before. What I would say is that the management plan is something that goes on our website as part of the planning condition. So those details are available for people who do seek them out, in the same way that, as the speaker said, the details are on the licensing conditions, on the licenses which are on the licensing website, part of the City Council website.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Webb?
Yeah, sort of on that point, I think I'll be honest. I mean, it didn't sound like this management agency had much concept of a management plan beyond, yeah, as I said, don't get caught by licensing. But I think that on that point specifically, Councillor Colwick, there is a danger, I think, in pushing a leaflet through everybody's door on the street and saying them there at 54 are a HMO. And I can see where you're coming from, and Councillor Craggill, I can see what you mean. But I just think there is a worry there that you're sort of singling one household out with 6 people in it, you know, when actually, regardless of what you think about HMO, is it right that they are going to be the brunt of that? So that's my point on that. But then my question was going to be for Gareth, on that condition regarding the management plan. Could you possibly give us any examples of things that form part of DOTI 1 through 4 there that we could really insist upon? I mean, how would you make the most robust management plan you possibly could? What kind of things could we add in there that would really help alleviate members' concerns?
I'm afraid I don't have an example in front of me that I can read from, and most of them do tend to follow a relatively standard pattern, I'd admit. I mean, in terms of information to and advice to occupants about noise and consideration, that's just the standard type of information they give out in terms of consideration to neighbours. I forget what the title of the there was an initiative, or there has been an initiative in the past about students being considerate neighbours, run by both of the universities, and bearing in mind that you know that you do live, if you're a student, you do live often live different hours and different lifestyles to your neighbours, and to take into account a consideration and in noise in terms of transference of noise through the building and keeping the noise down and things like that, and also in pointing out that the City Council, through environmental health powers, does have enforcement powers in terms of noisy neighbours. Garden maintenance, that is normally a telling us how often and when maintenance is carried out, and it tends to set various standards about how the property should be maintained. Refuse and recycling facilities, again, it's a case of making sure that adequate facilities are available and kept in a clean and tidy condition, and where the refuse and recycling is kept. Property maintenance, again, it's an issue about a proper maintenance schedule in terms of putting right those defects that perhaps aren't addressed when the owner isn't living within the property. I would also point out that these this management plan is a management plan that's imposed on the property owners. It's not something that we would normally allow them to devolve to the occupants themselves.
Okay, thank you.
So just follow up on that. In terms of frequency for garden maintenance and property maintenance, well, I suppose garden maintenance is the main one. What's the normal? What would you expect?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I'm not sure what we normally ask for on that.
Councillor Perrett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about permitted development rights, and forgive me if I've not seen whether or not we put any sort of limits on these and whether or not it would be reasonable. But I know that one speaker had referenced the size of the structure that was built to house the cycles that went up in September, obviously prior to us hearing this, and another mentioned the size of the extension. I don't know whether or not it would be reasonable for us to request permission was sought before any other changes were made to the property, because obviously there's a bit of worry from the neighbours about it being overdevelopment of the site and the impact that it will have on them.
I think the extension is pre-existing. I'm not aware that the extension is a recent structure. There's no reference, as far as I'm aware, there's no reference to any recent permissions. HMOs have permitted development rights in the same way that family or single occupancy properties have permitted development rights. We wouldn't normally seek to remove those permitted development rights in respect of a change of use to an HMO. I'm not aware of us ever having done that before. The permitted development rights have tolerances and limitations that they have to apply to have to comply with, rather, and I don't think it would be reasonable for us to require them to put in applications for additional sheds or extensions that would otherwise be considered to be acceptable. They wouldn't, after all, affect the occupancy of the property beyond the 6, which would be allowed under the existing use classes order.
Can I just clarify on that point, because one of the speakers did mention that the cycle shed and the size of it, is that within the permitted tolerances then for development to have? Sorry, I didn't note down the exact sizes that the speaker had mentioned, but I think he said it was the 8th of September when that structure was put up, which obviously is more recent.
My understanding from the case officer is that was something that would have been under permitted development rights. In terms of its height, my recollection, so I don't tend to deal with these things on a day-to-day basis, but in terms of structures close to or on the boundary, I think the limitation in height is 2.5 metres. I think the speaker said this was 2.2 metres in height.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, we are going around the houses just a little bit. We've had these debates over the years on houses of multiple occupation, and unless we can find a good reason to turn it down, with very little chance of it ever being upheld by a planning inspector. It seems to me, regrettable as it might be, and I have every sympathy with people in this kind of situation, certainly up in Scarcroft Hill. It seems to me that given that it's well under the thresholds, under the article, whatever we call it, Article 8, is it, Gareth?
Article 4.
Article 4. it's well within the threshold of Article 4. There's really no grounds for turning this down whatsoever. And whilst it gives me no pleasure, I think, to get it moved on, because I think we're just kicking it round, and we shall come back to the same conclusion. I'm prepared, regrettably, to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there aren't any further questions at the moment, so I think we can take that as having moved us into debate. So I've got a proposal there from Councillor Galvin. Is anybody willing to second? If you could raise your sort of physical hand. Sorry, Councillor Orrell.
Yes, just second, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Melly, I can see you've got your blue hand up.
Yeah, just I was raising my hand so I could speak in debate rather than for or against the proposed motion. So that's...
Yeah. So we've proposed and seconded. So if you're happy now to give general thoughts, and then we'll move to the vote when you're finished.
I was just, reflecting on what everyone's been saying, what the public speakers have been saying, and what committee members and officers have been saying about noise concerns and how we mitigate against that. And as far as I can tell, the reason why there are noise concerns relating to this application over and above what you'd have from any other HMO application, or really any other dwelling at all, is related to the kind of lack of shared amenity space. There's just that one room which is labelled as lounge / kitchen / diner, which is really the only reasonable shared amenity space for residents to use when they're not in their bedrooms. So I was just wondering whether, instead of one of the ground floor bedrooms being a bedroom, being a living room and shared amenity space, would reduce the concerns about parking and reduce concerns about noise, and reduce my concerns about amenity of future residents. Well, no, it's retrospective, current residents as well as future residents.
Thank you. I guess in a sense we do have a proposal which is already seconded. I guess if people felt that changes to that sort of proposal and second were necessary, I guess the best approach would be to vote against the application, vote against that proposal, and then we can come back to it. But Councillor Fisher, you want to go next?
Thank you, Chair. I've just had a good look at this on Google Maps, and I did have a client somewhere down there, I can't remember exactly where, a few years ago, and I remember that parking was an absolute nightmare. There were several occasions where I turned up to teach and I had to go away because I couldn't find anywhere to park. Now, that was several years ago, before the actual introduction of this 6-bedroomed HMO, or this 6-occupant HMO. And I really do worry about the actual level of car parking down there. But the trouble is, our highways have said they don't think there's a problem. I certainly won't be supporting the application, but I certainly won't be refusing it either, because I think if it went to appeal, I hate to say it, I think it would be passed. But I also have some concerns about the liberal attitude towards the planning laws shown by the occupant and who has happily put this out for 4 months as an unlicensed, unregulated HMO, or without planning permission. Does that really show that the person is going to conform to the management plans and such like? I certainly won't be supporting the application.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure our legal people will say that that's not really something we should be sort of have in our minds. We have the application.
My first reason is car parking, is that I'm concerned about. I don't think it's a reason for refusal, but I'm not supporting it.
Okay, thank you. At that point, I would like to move to a vote on this. Councillor Crackhill, would you like the final say?
I just wanted clarification. I thought the points Councillor Melly made were rather good, but we can't really change the application in front of us, can we? It's for 6-bedroom. We can't say we think it should be 5-bedroom, can we? So is that correct? So presumably if we think it could be 5-bedroom, then we'd just refuse it, would we? Or
is that
partly a question? Yeah.
I was going to say you are in debate, but if that's to me, no, we'd look at what is as a local. Well, I say we as a local planning authority look at what's in front of us. If you felt that a 6-bedroom house in multiple occupation was too much of an intensive use of the property, then the approach would be to refuse planning permission. My advice would be not to do that. The licensing regime looks at sizes of bedrooms and amount of amenity space and things like that, so that are available within properties. I think we would have a great deal of difficulty trying to defend an appeal on the basis of reducing the number of occupants in an HMO property when the law allows up to 6. And this is a significant sized house.
Yeah. Thank you. I think if there aren't any further points that desperately need to be made, I would like to move to the vote on this. Councillor Merry, very briefly, if possible.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's not just about the amount of amenity space, which in my view is very low. It's the nature of the amenity space as well, and what we heard from the public speaker about the nature of that amenity space. I think needs to be taken into consideration, as well as just the square meterage of it. Yes, use class C4 is for up to 6 residents, but in the past we've capped the number within a use class. So with large HMOs which allow up to 8, for example, we've said actually we're going to condition that it's a limit of 7. And also there is another bedroom upstairs. There are 7 bedrooms in total. So just instead of a bedroom being downstairs, that could be more amenity space instead of the room 5 upstairs. So it'd be the same total number of bedrooms, same total number of residents, but with more reasonable, likely to be used amenity space.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that kind of gives us 2 options, either changing the plans or changing the number.
Chair, could I just come in there? Part of what we're looking at is the use of the premises and the impact on that of that use on the amenity of the area, character of the area, whether it becomes a balanced or unbalanced community. The planning system very rarely gets involved in how that space within the walls is set out, and in terms of it would just not be enforceable to, in my view, would not be reasonable to try and enforce a planning condition that perhaps said that room 1 had to be a lounge and room 3 could be a bedroom. I think that's outside, or certainly very much pushing at the edges of our remit.
We talk about amenity space all the time. And
thank you. I think there we've got, we take the point. We've got Gareth's advice, which I don't think is going to change really. I think we do really need to move to the vote on this. So, Gareth, if you're able to give us a quick summary, Michelle, if you're in the background and.
Sorry. Yes, Chair, so the motion is to approve the application with the 3 planning conditions and an amendment to planning condition number 3 to include reference to a system in place for responding to complaints about tenants and the property.
Okay, thank you. Can I just check then that all members have heard the debate so far? If you could raise a hand. Thank you. And Michelle, if you're able to conduct the vote for us, please.
Sure. So members, please state whether you'll be voting for, against or abstaining. Councillor Craghill.
4.
Councillor Cullig.
4.
Councillor Fisher.
Abstain.
Councillor Galvin.
4.
Councillor Melly.
4.
Councillor Orrell.
4.
Councillor Perrott.
4.
Councillor Wardby.
4.
Councillor Webb.
Abstain.
And Councillor Hollier.
4.
So the motion to approve is carried.
Okay, thank you. So that is approved. So it really just, there's no urgent business under the remit of the committee, so it just remains to thank everybody for your time this evening, and particularly all our planning officers and technical officers in the background. Just to wish everybody a Merry Christmas as well, and I'll see you in the new year.
And a Merry Christmas to everybody from me as well.